Good evening. Welcome to LoveLogical, DNA Not Required. This is Michelle L. Anderson, coming to you live from PodcastDetroit, Royal Oak Studios. We are looking forward to intriguing and entertaining you every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Let me start today's show by saying thank you for joining our family, which is biological by nature, LoveLogical by choice, DNA Not Required. Good evening, good evening, everyone. This is Michelle Anderson coming to you live from Podcast Detroit, Royal Oak Studios with my co-host, Delon Kennedy.
Hey.
We have been just given the best opportunity to bring to you tonight live Brandon Michael Higgins, and from Giving Joshua a Chance. And Brandon lives in Indianapolis, and I had the opportunity to meet him through Miss Samantha Pounds, which everyone in Indianapolis knows who Samantha is. And just Brandon's story just made me say, okay, I have to have him on my podcast. And we've been planning this for a while. So, Brandon, welcome, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I just first and foremost want to thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, looking forward to this dialogue and, collaborating with you now and also in the future.
Yes, I'm telling you, your story is just absolutely amazing because you are LoveLogical to the core. You really are. You have a LoveLogical heart. And for those of you who are not familiar with LoveLogical, it's LoveLogical, biological by nature, LoveLogical by choice, DNA not required. We celebrate the non-biological within you and your businesses. So not only are you LoveLogical through foster, adoption, and your extended family is huge, but you also have a LoveLogical business, Giving Joshua a Chance, that made me cry when I read the story. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into Giving Joshua a Chance. Tell us how you became you.
Yes, ma'am. So a big part of me started with foster care. That's a big part of my identity. And as many of those who do know me, I identify as being biracial. And so my biological mother's white, my father is black. And so kind of how my journey started with my identity is, identifying as being biracial. And, going back to foster care. So I didn't have the easiest life growing up. And a part of that through the struggle made me who I am. And for that, I'm very, very much grateful. A lot of people say, Brandon, you're often happy. I usually don't take, people to feel sorry for me, or people who, always like, you should be mad at the world when I really shouldn't. I'm grateful for my circumstance. I wouldn't do it again, but I'm most definitely grateful for. So I always like to start off as identifying my struggle as a big part of my identity. And so I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I've actually just moved back at the end of summer 2017. I actually was working on a fellowship and doing some research in Africa. So I was working on my PhD for about a year at the University of Minnesota. Prior to that, I finished my master's in social work at the University of Arkansas. And, social work for me gives me the opportunity to give back to the community in which, I'm a part of, and that is the foster youth system. As an alumni, I feel like it's my duty to give back to this community, and that's, kind of where Giving Joshua a Chance came from, as well as my little brother Joshua, from where this all started. Mm-hmm. That's my motivation. I wake up every day, I talk to him through spirit, and, he's the one who motivates me.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Wow. Now, I know that you're saying that, your identity basically started in foster care. Are you okay to tell us how you ended up within the fostering system? Because I know you were like 8, 9 years old.
Yes. So I started off, my mother She was on drugs, single parent. My mom, I also want to start this. I didn't learn until I was like a junior in college, kind of the struggles my mom went through.
Okay.
And so she had me when she was 16. I was actually born in foster care. And so my mom was in foster care when she had me because my biological family, extremely racist. And so they were upset with my mom for having a black kid. And so she was in foster care at the time when she had me. And so, I reflect back on that. Like, wow, essentially I was born into foster care. And so my mom was, she struggled with drugs. She was abused when she was younger. And so, reflecting back on that, I see why she made a lot of the decisions she did. And so, I will never forget the first day of fifth grade. At this time, my mom had been gone for a couple of days, and we were staying with my biological grandma, and that's her mom. And so, my grandma, she wasn't a fan of us. More so, she didn't want to take care of us, so she called CPS and told them to come get us. And that's kind of, I remember that discussion with the CPS worker and was like, I remember seeing some white stuff on the table. And for the longest, I struggled with that because I felt responsible for, my brother not being in foster care because I felt like, I told them, like, my mom was doing drugs. And essentially that's what led us on top of the neglect.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And how old were you, and how old was your brother? I know you say 8 or 9. How much younger is Joshua than you are?
So Josh is about a year and 3 months. Yep, a year and 3 months.
So very
So I
close
was born
in
in
age.
February 11th. Yeah, we're fairly close. I was born on February 11th, 1990. He was born November 12th, 1991. So yeah, it's not too far off.
So when your mother aged out of the foster care system and she was a little bit older and you went to go and live with her, life then was pretty much so a struggle, even at home. And then you went into the foster care system. Did things in the beginning, did they get a little bit easier for you, or was it automatically just a continual struggle even once you got into the system?
So for me, the system, one would think that it would get easier. And so, again, going back to my identity, growing up, I was surrounded by all white people. And so that's all I knew, this brown-skinned kid. And I'm like, all I knew was white people. So my first foster family was African-American. And, we go from, really not doing much. We lived in poverty. I mean, we still stayed in poverty. But now it's, I'm drinking Kool-Aid. I'm eating chitlins. I'm like, what is this? I had no clue. They're looking at me like, what? I'm like, what is this? And so to me, I struggled a lot because I felt that I didn't belong. And also, in my first placement, we were abused physically. I was sexually abused by my foster brother. So to me, this was, something I struggled with the longest. I probably just a few years ago came out and, shared that I was sexually abused because, I was ashamed of what happened. I took blame for what happened and I never spoke up. And so once my brother passed, Joshua, I told myself from that point on, like, I'm no longer going to be quiet. I'm going to advocate. I'm going to speak up. And I'm going to speak my truth. And so part of that, my abuse is my truth. And so, this was a very hard placement. It's a new transition. All this abuse is going on. And it was a really big change. And I struggled for a long time.
Wow. So your first placement was with a African American family, and you said it's the first time, as far as chitlins and everything else. I think that all of us at some point in time had to find out, like, what are chitlins, and then it's like, oh, but then it's like, and then again you get older and it's like, oh, again. Yeah, chitlins can confuse a lot of us. So how many homes were you in before you were adopted?
Officially, I was in 3 foster homes. Throughout that time, we were in multiple respite homes. And so I was first with my first family. And then, so once we switched schools, I was in 5th grade at the time. And so my 5th grade teacher actually got us my second half of 6th grade. And then after that, we spent another time with what would be my adopted family. That was our 3rd home. But in between each of those homes, we spent some time in different respite homes.
Can you explain to the audience what a respite home is, please?
Yeah, so a respite home is a temporary foster placement, and so these are more so very, very short term, such as maybe a couple of days or like a week or two. And the reasons we spend time in respite is because our caseworkers, along with our foster homes, more so the transition from our first home to the second home, and a couple times within our second home, which was my fifth grade teacher, we were placed in the different respite homes.
Okay.
How did that affect you emotionally? Like going from home to home?
Reflecting back on it, it was very traumatic. And so I tell a lot of people, they're like, wow, you're really successful. I'm like, yeah, that's because of hard work. I was behind educationally, so I really didn't care. I know fifth grade, I was suspended like 6, 7, 8, 9 times. I had about 17 referrals. There was one time I got a referral for being in trouble, and then I forged my foster mom's signature, took it back and got another referral. Then I got suspended for a couple of days. And so I struggled a lot behaviorally. I was getting in fights all the time. And I honestly, without my fifth grade teacher helping out, D's, F's. I honestly shouldn't have moved on to sixth grade, but, we'll talk about that later. But I feel like at that point in time, that really motivated me and kind of changed my perspective about the people who were supporting me. But it was rough for me, and I acted out, I feel like, as any kid would who was not able to kind of communicate that.
Yeah, I know that I can imagine that it's hard to verbalize. My parents, we had foster children in our home as well. And I'm very blessed to be able to say that, we had a LoveLogical home. Did you have a home that you would have deemed as LoveLogical, fostering parents as opposed to just foster parents, where you knew that they truly loved you? Did you have that?
I would say my fifth grade teacher, at least reflecting back then, she was Caucasian along with her husband, Tom. And, at this point, I was, 11, 12 years old. This was my first time having my own bed, my own room. And they kind of showed me, they had access to resources. I had a pet guinea pig for the first time, and I was able to learn new languages, and I had a tutor fund. And so I'm seeing all these things that, wow, this is really cool. But on top of that, reflecting back on it, her son was the only white kid at the rec center. He played with all black kids. She looked at and she supported our culture at this point. A lot of white parents who adopt or who foster children of color necessarily don't do that. And so looking back on it, I do appreciate her for doing that because, she exposed us to new adventures, for lack of a better term, and to new things. But she also took in consideration our culture and how we identify. And, I truly appreciate her for that.
So she truly instilled education within you.
Oh, very much so. And, I feel like looking back on that, that's what really pushed me to go to college. Because when I got with my, what would be adopted family, college for me really wasn't important. I didn't think about it. I was more in tune with sports.
Okay. It's amazing that your fifth grade teacher became your LoveLogical foster mom, and she instilled so much within you. So she truly helped to build the character that is a part of you today.
Yeah.
Very much so. And there were also, there was a lot of behavior there. But there was one situation that stood out that I didn't agree with. And, we talked to, she's basically like family. I spent time with her and her family over the holidays. But I was hospitalized for my anger. I was 13 years old. Well, I was 12. And so I spent my 13th birthday in the hospital. And so there's a situation, I want to tell people, they're like, wow, you were crazy. I'm like, no, I really wasn't. And so I would often get mad and throw things. So I was in the van with her, and she was driving, and so she's a teacher. She kept snacks,
Mm-hmm.
and so she said something that rubbed me the wrong way. I took the applesauce, I threw it on the ground, and it bounced up and went into her driver's seat. And she
Wow.
freaked out. She's like, they're trying to kill me. Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And so after anger outbursts, I would get really sleepy. And so I woke up, and, she took me to Taco Bell. I was really excited, like, ooh, I finally get to eat. And then she took me to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a disagreement she had with her caseworkers, because prior to this, Josh, he was also hospitalized. And I feel like culturally, again, reflecting on that, as a Caucasian woman, she maybe felt like, this was the help we really needed. And I tell her to this day, she was like, that decision I made changed your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I disagree, because the only reason I didn't go back to the hospital is because I didn't like it.
Okay.
And to be institutionalized was literally the worst feeling, especially spending my birthday in there. And so I admit I learned a few coping skills, but I made that decision from that point on that I'm going to change my life. And, I do appreciate her for that, I guess, because from that point on, I kind of changed my attitude and, moved forward with a new attitude.
Do you think that your attitude would have changed even had you not gone? Because if she's saying that I think I saved your life, but you're saying, well, not really. So, but do you really, when you think back on that, do you think that being there, learning those coping skills, even though I know no 13-year-old wants to be in the hospital for their birthday, but had you not learned those coping skills, would you have continued to make it through your teens in a positive way?
I believe so. At this point, reflecting back on my notes,
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to reach out to my adoptive agency and get some of the notes. Like I was on a good path.
Okay.
Making good grades. I was finally caught up, and we were in a township school compared to like a public school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I again had access to more resources, and I was taking advantage of those. But I feel like I was on a good path. But again, I'm a true believer that everything happens for a reason. So that could have been just a part of my path and my purpose.
That's my personal mantra. I say it at least once a day that everything happens for a reason. And I truly feel that way as well. Now, how old were you, Brandon, when you were adopted?
And so I was adopted at the age of 13. And so it was, I want to say August of 2002. And so I was in 8th grade. I had recently started 8th grade. And I, again, going through my notes, and I realized at the time that, we wrote a letter to our judge that because we were taken out of our 5th grade teacher's house and then placed with our adopted family. And so, the narrative, at least from my 5th grade teacher's standpoint, was they took you out of our home because they felt like we as white parents were not fit to raise 2 African American males. And so
Okay.
from that point, the age of 12 to the age of 24, when I found out the truth, this was the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the truth was that my adopted or my foster dad at the time stated that they didn't want to adopt my little brother. They wanted to adopt me. And so with them, with us being siblings, they wanted to keep us together. And so they moved us to my adoptive placement. It was kind of weird, though. And this is kind of where I struggle because my adopted dad was my caseworker at the time. And so he got us, and he kind of took us to meet his wife and kind of showed us, like, oh, do you like these boys? Turns out she did. And so a week later, we were in foster care with them and then spent about a year, and then we were adopted.
Okay.
So it's almost like he removed you based on personal reasons more so than
Right,
anything
correct.
else. Because isn't that
Yes, ma'am.
unusual for a caseworker to
I would
become a
think so.
foster parent, to become your adoptive
Adoptive
parents?
Exactly. And so through my personal research, once my little brother passed away,
Mm-hmm.
because as Josh sat in the hospital, dying, from a gunshot wound, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He came up to the hospital, and I told him, I was like, "You gave my little brother up. You can't see him." And so, come to find out that they weren't supposed to. I contacted our adoptive agency, and was like, "Hey, what is your policy about your workers adopting?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we know him, but his dad was also, I guess, listed as a foster parent." So they're like, "Oh, we thought you were in foster care with Dad." I was like, "No," because they have the same name. One is the third, and one's the second, and so, or junior, and so we were like, "No." So how did this, slip under your agency? And so I, again, once I graduated with my degree in social work, I reached out to the agency. I wanted to work at the agency. They wouldn't return my calls. They wouldn't return my emails. And the same CEO who was in there, during the time of our adoption, still works for the agency. They're like, "Oh, we're going to have her reach out to you." Never returned any of my emails, calls, or anything. And so, I struggle with this because I'm like, how did this happen and essentially cause, the situation with my little brother?
Well, if they knew the situation, that may be why they didn't call you back out of fear of, a legal suit. But when you and Joshua went to go and live with them at 12 and 13, and the wife liked the two of you, could you share with the audience how it ended up you two being separated and then you being the only one being raised within the home?
Yes. So with that, again, at this point, I was really quiet, and, I've kind of grown out of those behaviors of acting out. I was just like, it was more of a survival tactic. If I shut up and, just keep my mouth closed and be quiet, I'll be 18 in a couple years. I'll be okay after that. Josh, again, this is another traumatic transition. He struggled with anger. We both did. And he was more, he was more combative. He's like, whatever. When we were in foster care with him, they're like, "We call us mom and dad." We're like, "Whoa, what?" Because, I called my fifth grade teacher Miss Embry for the longest.
Right.
I'm like, they never forced us to call her mom, dad. Who are you guys? And it was more like a power struggle with them. There are situations they had a baby, and I'm like, this is new. They're like, you have to change the baby's diaper and do all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this is new. And so it was more of like, you call us mom and dad, you do this. And, we struggled with that. We felt like we were treated as stepchildren. And so this situation in which I will never forget this day. So we were together. My little brother was over at my cousin's house. And so we went to go pick up Josh. Anyone that knew Josh knew that he moved extremely slow, like a sloth. I mean, he would just move, take his time. And so we had pulled up to my cousin's driveway. We're like, "Come on, Josh, come on." He was moving slow. I mean, him and my cousins were walking up. And, they continued to like, Josh. He said, "I'm coming, B-word." He called my adopted mama B-word. And, they were like, "Whoa." So my adopted dad, mind you, Josh is 12 at the time. And so we were with them probably about a year. About a year at this point. And, he's 250. I mean, he's a pretty big dude. He jumps on Josh. He's wrestling him. He offended his wife. And so I'm trying to get him off. They push me off. They call the cops. And so they have Josh arrested. And he's like, "Oh, he attacked my wife. He attacked me." And, the whole time I'm like freaking out, like, wow, this did not just happen.
And this is a 13-year-old child, actually. He was 13 at the time.
Right. And so I'm like, whoa, like, what's going on? I mean, my little brother's 8, and, he's in 8th grade. I'm like, what kind of harm is he going to do to the, this is not what happened, had him locked up. So from that point, Josh was locked up, he got out, I think, my junior year of high school. And so going back to the hospital, it turns out that they gave up their rights when Josh was locked up.
So Joshua, he was in juvenile from that entire time?
Yes, ma'am. Juvenile boys school. And turns out they could have got a probation officer because my biological uncle ended up getting Josh, and so we stayed in contact with him, very sneakily because my adoptive parents didn't want us to stay in contact with my bio parents, my bio family, and so they cut us off from everybody. I would tell people I'm biracial. They're like, "No, you're not. You're black." And I'm like, and that's the issue. I think because I was older, I had a better sense of my identity. I knew what happened. I knew what was going on, and they tried to control me. And with me as being quiet, that was safe for me. But Josh, he couldn't get past it. He was very, he spoke up for himself, and unfortunately, that's what led him to be in the situation he was.
So you kept your head down, and he was the one who wanted to have his own identity.
He's more assertive.
He's more assertive.
Yeah. Right.
Wow, that's
right.
absolutely amazing. Like I'm so sorry you went through that situation.
When you were saying that when you were in the hospital at 13, that Joshua was in the hospital too. Was he in the hospital for the same reason?
Yep, anger. And so they felt that treating us, through these tactics would help us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they did, honestly.
Were you in the hospital together?
Not together, probably a couple months apart.
Okay, because I was thinking it was at the same time as well. So that's, wow. So as he's taken away, he goes into the juvenile justice system, basically, for doing something that he didn't do. Well, for something that he didn't really do. He called her out of her
Right.
name, but he never physically attacked anyone.
No, ma'am.
But he had no one to fight for him. So no one fought for him at all. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And so, when I would ask about Josh. They were like, "Oh, he's fine. He's doing good." Whole time literally, his probation officer was trying to reach out, letters, phone calls. They never responded. They gave up their rights to a 13-year-old boy and left him in the system. And that's exactly what happened. He became institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
This was now his family. The thugs, individuals who were engaging in crime. And again, the statistics, the research now, I understand why Josh took the route he did. This is all he had, because everything else that was supposed to be a protective factor ended up turning its back against him and, left this young kid to fend for himself.
That just probably helped rage grow within him.
Yeah.
Because he felt totally unwanted.
Abandoned.
Yeah.
Very much so.
That's just it hurts my heart, and
Yeah.
so when he came out at 17 and he went to go live with your biological uncle, did your uncle kind of embrace him and try to help make things a little better, more positive in his life, or introduce him to therapy or anything like that?
He tried to. And so
Okay.
with my bio uncle, he's homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
And so Josh didn't agree with that lifestyle, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so along with my biological family, I was the first person from my bio family to graduate high school. And so we're coming from individuals who aren't well educated, who don't look at therapy because they didn't have access to therapy. And so what they did, and I love my uncle for this, he did his best to look out for Josh and to support Josh. But Josh struggled. He's been locked up so long. This is when technology is starting to boom.
Mm-hmm.
Things are new, and he's freaking out just as any person would coming back out to the world. And, my uncle sharing with me, Josh is still protecting his food, putting his hands around his plate, eating really fast, like he's, still in prison and, or still in juvenile. And, my little brother, the kids he was hanging around, my uncle at the time still lived in the hood. And so Josh still had direct access to all those negative things that he would as, in juvenile.
Wow.
So he continued the same behaviors and everything. How long did Josh live with your uncle?
Maybe a year or two. And so during that time, Josh then got put into prison due to armed robbery with some of his friends.
Did we lose you?
Oh no, ma'am. Did
Okay.
you also? Yeah, during that time, he got a case, or he caught a case with armed robbery with some of his friends.
Mm-hmm. So he continued to spiral and in search of himself. How was your relationship with Josh during this time? Did he pull away from you, being that you were in college and you were moving forward in a
Yeah.
positive way? How did he react towards you?
So during this time, I was able to see Josh a few times before I transitioned to college. And so once I was in college, I told him, he told me all the time, he would tell people he was so proud of me for, making it to college. And, I'll never forget the letters that we wrote. I still have all the letters Josh wrote me while he was locked up.
Wow.
And, he would struggle. He felt that, there were times that I couldn't respond in a timely manner because I had, term papers, I had research papers, I had a lot of stuff going on. And, I'm a first generation college student.
Mm-hmm.
This is new to me. My adopted mom went to college for a couple of years, but that was so long ago. So this was a new experience I was experiencing by myself, and I didn't really have that support. And so, Josh felt, he's like, there were times he told me, I feel like you don't really love me. You're not here for me. And I struggled with that. But I always told Josh, like, you're the reason I'm where I am now is because you push me. I look at you as being, the strongest. And, I respect you for, standing up and speaking up for things you believe in. And I respect you, Josh.
He didn't understand everything that it took for you to make it day by day while in college. I want to back up a minute to your being a teenager between your 14 to 18. Because while Josh was institutionalized between 13 and 17, how was your life at that time with your foster parents? With your adopted parents. I know they were telling you that he was okay, but were they treating you well during that time?
Um, Looking back on that, uh, I was treated like a kid. I had to share a room with my 5-year-old brother. I'm in high school at this time, and I had to ask. When I got older, when I started driving, if I could drive the car, and I would have to bargain. So they had horses, and so he was like, "Go clean the horses' stalls, then I'll let you borrow my car."
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do all the chores. I had a younger sister, a younger brother. They never had to do anything. And there were times, I struggled a lot because I would try to speak up for myself, or I'm like, "Hey, can I do this? Can I do that?" And it was a lot of bargaining, or me having to kind of put my head down and just shuffle forward. And there's a situation I'll never forget. I was a senior in high school, and I wrestled. And I went to go pick up my friend Ishmael for wrestling practice. The whole time, my adopted dad is like trailing me in his truck. And I pull up to Ishmael's house, pick up Ishmael, and we're pulling off, and he cuts me off, and he's like, and excuse my French, he's like, take my effing car back home. What are you doing? And I'm like, you clearly see Ishmael's in the car. Like, I picked him up for. He's like, you didn't tell me. And I'm like, first of all, I'm 18. Why do I need to tell you? And, these types of things had continued, and it wasn't until that time I was like, wow, how short of a leash am I really on?
Mm-hmm.
And, I really felt like I was treated like a stepchild, and I felt like I had to prove myself to my adoptive parents.
All the
And,
time.
that's
Yeah.
for me, yeah, all the time,
Mm-hmm.
even moving into college.
Have
Wow.
you talked to them like about this since, like how you felt?
So there was after finding out what happened to Josh, I cut them off entirely. And so there was after though, I text my adopted mom, and again, I asked her, I said, why would you adopt us if that's what you were going to do to Josh? And all she could tell me was, well, maybe we weren't the parents for you. And, I was like, wow.
How old?
14 years later,
I
and
I'm
this
shocked.
is
I'm literally
right,
shocked to hear
Yeah.
that.
literally. And I was like, wow, that's all you can tell me. And I literally had nothing else to do. And so when I started sharing my story, people at the church, he was a preacher. He then moved on to start his new church, and people were like, wow, we had no clue that this family was like that. And I'm like, we were trying to tell you guys, expose you to the truth. And, after all these years, after this stuff happened to Josh, I have that platform to speak up and, to advocate on behalf of this, because I know we're not the only kids that have gone through stuff like this, but this was our reality. And for me, after she said that, I had to look at the situation holistically and just say, wow, everything makes sense now.
Wow, it hurts my heart to hear this. Her response just I have to get past that right now
Yeah.
because that kind of threw me for a loop. That maybe we just weren't the right parents for you. That's just not that's not a loving response, or a person who has raised a child
As their own.
and have their own to say something like that. So I want to apologize on behalf of her because that's just I'm truly a mom. I'm a very nurturing person, and that threw me for a loop. You gotta give me a second here.
Yeah.
Um, so you how did it get to a point to where Joshua took his life? You know, because you were moving forward with college and everything, and you're still trying to let him know that he's loved by you. Um, and I'm sure that your uncle, from what you shared, with your uncle, that he was also there, um, as he could be. So how did Joshua get to a point to where he made that decision? Do you know?
I do. So, fortunately, after college, I graduated from undergrad in 2013. And, at this time, Josh was back in Indy. And so, for actually, my fifth grade teacher sent me and her son, Nick, to South America as a graduation gift. He graduated with his master's and me with my bachelor's. And so, once we got back from South America, and I had an opportunity to spend time with Josh, at this point, he was out. He was working. He was working under the table. He had a couple felonies, and so work was hard for him. But he found her. He found work. He was working at this. It was this factory. It was kind of sketch, but he was folding linen. And this is something anyone who knew Josh. Like, oh, Josh, come on, you're lazy. You know, and Josh was working hard, so to see him in this, I don't know, the environment was weird for me, but he would wake up, no excuses. He would take the bus. He hated asking me for help, but there were times I would, take him to the bus stop. So at this time, I was actually staying with Miss Embry
Mm-hmm.
when I got out of college. And, he would come over there. We would spend time together, catch up. And so Josh and I were spending a lot of time together. Throughout this, he got a girlfriend. And so she had a baby. She had a baby girl. And, he took on this father role. And just to see my little brother in that fashion was like, wow, he's growing up. And so there was, again, so I'm in a fraternity. I'm in a Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
You had to
And
get that
so,
shout out, didn't you?
yes, ma'am. But so we were at this gathering, and Josh again never had that exposure to that, and so we went to a party, and Josh, out of all years, I never seen him break down like this, and he hugged me, he was crying, and he said, I have a baby boy on the way. I'm like, wow, what?
Oh.
I'm about to be an uncle. So, throughout this time, Josh is helping take care of his girlfriend. He has his own family now.
Mm-hmm.
And, here comes baby Joshua. And, there's during this time, though, my little brother, so we grew up, watching our mom being abused by her stepdad.
Mm-hmm.
And, we told each other, like, we would never engage in that. We'll never do that. And unfortunately, this was an aspect that was lost of, kind of the story. So Josh's girlfriend, she would cut up his clothes. So there were times I would have to take him to the store, run him to Walmart to grab some dinky pants for work because, a lot of his clothes were being ripped up. They were getting in arguments. And so about a week before everything happened, I was getting ready for graduate school. I was leaving for Arkansas. And I told Josh, was like, man, you really need to leave. Just come here to Miss Embry's. Like, we'll get you out of the situation. We'll find a way that, you guys can co-parent. And so the day of my open house, August 9th, 2014 would be the last day, I see Josh. And so after my open house, Miss Embry had bought tickets to the Wayne versus Drake concert.
Mm-hmm.
And, to Josh, his girlfriend. And, my biological mom at the time was staying in Florida. She actually flew down, which was crazy, for the open house, although she didn't actually, attend the open house.
Mm-hmm.
She was down there. So what happened was Josh and his girlfriend went to the concert. They were drinking. And so on the way back, ended up getting into an argument. And so throughout the altercation, it was physical. It went to the house. It continued. It escalated. And so throughout the argument, Josh ended up shooting his girlfriend. And this is when the police pulled up. And so he shot her. She died on the scene. And, the police shot. Josh ran to the back and then shot himself. And so Josh didn't die instantly. He went to the hospital. And so that next morning, I was in church. My cousin Sean is a pastor. And I was sitting in church, and that day I chose to join church, join his church. I had this weird feeling the entire service. And so I literally, as soon as church was over, I got a call from my uncle. And he's like, Brandon, it's all over the news. Josh's girlfriend is dead. And I'm like, what is going on? And so, I go to, I fly down the street to Josh's apartment, and there's bullet holes everywhere. His apartment is cleaned out. There's no yellow tape or anything. This happened at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Bullet holes. There's blood on the walls, and I'm freaking out. Where's my little brother? So I call up to Eskenazi Hospital, and this is a fairly new hospital, and it's really weird because I now work there as a medical social worker, and reflecting back on that, how everything worked out. I now work at the place my little brother took his last breath, and here he is struggling, and just to breathe and just to function. The doctors initially was like, he has a good chance of recovering. There could be some developmental issues that come with this, but there was hope. And this happened on Sunday, so from Sunday through Thursday, where I was leaving for Arkansas, I was in the hospital with him, and I didn't eat much, I didn't sleep, and so when I left for Arkansas, I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave it up to whatever's in the universe, whatever is supposed to happen is gonna happen, and so I left and went to graduate school, and so I was starting, again checking in because at this point my adopted family gave up their rights. My biological mom's rights were terminated, so I was the one who was in charge of making decisions. And so right before I was headed to orientation to start my master's, the doctor called and said, he's not going to make it. What would you like to do? And so at the age of 24, I literally had to make the hardest decision of my life. And that was to pull the plug on Josh.
I understand. I've had to make that decision in my life, so I do know that that's a very hard decision to make. And the fact of you having to make it at such a young age, I can't even I can't even imagine. And who did you have there to help support you through? Were you alone? You weren't. Were you alone when you made the decision?
I was literally never forget. I answered the phone from the doctor. I was in my room, and I was literally about to walk out the door. So I made the decision and just walked out. I didn't cry. I was in shock. I was like, wow, um, wow. And so during this transition, my mentor, who turns out to be one of the best supports of my life, Dr. Valandra. She was my well, she is my mentor. I look at her as a mother figure as well,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was a professor at the University of Arkansas who I did my graduate assistantship with, and I was able to lean on her for support, but I moved to Arkansas not knowing anyone. I was there by myself, and all I could do is at the time call my girlfriend, my family, and kind of work through it that way.
What made you decide to develop an organization like giving Joshua a chance? Because I know what makes you good at it, but I'd like to know what made you make that decision to start the organization.
And so, when I tell people that story about Josh, and the first thing, even going back to the comments of when the news covered the stories, like, oh, he's such a monster, he's a loser, he's a coward for shooting her. I didn't want Josh's legacy to be lost in that. I knew my little brother, and a big part of social work, especially working with people who are vulnerable, people who may be homeless, people who struggle with drug addiction, is they look at that situation. They don't look at the historical significance of why they now make the decisions that they do. And so I want people to know that, Josh was a good kid. He was artistic. He was creative. He was fun. He was awesome. And so, you know, this is Josh's legacy. And, he no longer can, he can't speak. And so I want this organization, I want him to live on with this organization for kids in similar situations, kids who are exiting foster care, who don't have supports, who are lost, who, have these negative associations, and, they lack that social capital. They lack resiliency. They lack confidence. And I want Josh's spirit to be engulfed in that. And as he continues to motivate me, I want his spirit to motivate those individuals that we impact.
I love it. I love what you're doing. Do you have any contact with baby Joshua?
None whatsoever. So he's staying with his girlfriend's his girlfriend's mom. It would be Joshua's grandmother, and we disagreed on a lot. She wanted to change his name. She didn't want anything to do with Josh. She's like, he ruined my life. And I understand. I don't take away from what Josh did. What he did was wrong. I don't support that. But I also do say, domestic violence is serious, and it goes both ways. But me as his uncle, I feel like, I'm quite capable of being a mentor, a role model in, baby Joshua's life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, unfortunately, when that happened, he and his sister were placed in foster care, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted him to have a totally different life
Right.
from that Josh and I had. So I struggle every day because I want to see my nephew, be successful, and I want to be a part of that. But unfortunately, I'm not.
Are you planning on taking it to the judicial system in hopes to be able to have the opportunity to see him and spend time with him?
I would love that. Unfortunately, he was already adopted, and yeah, so that's pretty much out the window. Even when we went to court, I wasn't even acknowledged as being a potential candidate, although I believe I was the most qualified.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I know sometimes when the courts are looking at younger people, they don't take everything into consideration. And you being who you are, I would really pray that they would have considered that. So,
right.
Well, I'm sorry, Miss Embry, your fifth grade teacher. I want to just, she sounds like the most remarkable woman. So you did have that Love Logical family,
Yeah.
and I feel as if she helped develop the Love Logical heart that you have within you,
Yep.
because she has shown you so much love. And I know that we're getting close to, the end of our show here today, but I love Miss Embry because
Yeah. She was an amazing
And
woman.
for,
she's pretty awesome.
for
And
her
you
to,
know, even still,
yes.
she's she's helped me in so many ways. Through her, her family. I now have a big brother, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband. I don't call many people dad, but he's been a father figure in my life. My grandma, Mama, our late her husband, Papa. I mean, I literally, this is my family, and they've shown me so many things, exposed me to so many different opportunities, and for that, I'm always going to be grateful. Spend holidays with them. This is my family. I choose from to be, and they're so awesome. I really love them, and Mrs. Embry is like she's so amazing, and she played a big part of my life in changing it.
Brandon, when we talked on the phone in December, you truly embraced and understood Love Logical and where I was going with it right away. And that means a lot, the DNA not required. So you grew up in a system where, I feel as if a home for a child is, it's either a house or it's a home. And usually when it is a home, it is love logical when there's non-biological relations, because of the fact that you're giving that child love. You're teaching them, you're instilling the best within them. And that's what Miss Embry did for you. And that's what you're doing for all of the children that you are working with today, because you have passion.
Yes. Like the conviction that you
Yeah.
have and the story that you just shared with us is absolutely amazing. And I thank you. I
I
thank you.
thank you for
Thank you
coming
so much.
on, and I would like to ask you if we can actually talk again, because I'd like to learn a little more about your relationship with Miss Embry and see if she'd be willing to come on with you as well. So to get
Oh,
to
most
know that
definitely.
part of you, because they are a part of who you are. And by her giving you a chance, she allowed you to create giving Joshua a chance.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And I will be contacting you very soon, because I would like us to have a part two. You're the first person I've ever asked to have a part
Yes.
two with, but I'd like to have a
Thank you. I'm
part
honored.
two. And because even with Dr. Alondra, you know, her being there for you. So you have your extended family that has surrounded you with so much love. And like I said, thank you for giving the love to the children within the fostering community, because there are so many kids out there that need that. And, people who are listening, I know that it sounds like it's very hard to raise children sometime that are non-biologically related to you, but it's really not that difficult, because it's just a matter of just opening up the love a little bit more. We have so many children within our fostering, communities in Michigan and Indiana,
Yes.
all over the United States, and every day there's more and more. So even if you can't foster or adopt, consider mentoring some of the children within the fostering system because they truly need someone to look up to and they need someone to show what love really is. And they need to experience the love logical within you. So, this is Michelle Anderson, my son, Delon Kennedy, and thank you so much, Brandon Michael Higgins. Go to Giving Joshua a Chance .com, correct?
Correct.
Okay, go to givingjoshuaachance.com. Read Brandon's story, donate, help out with what he's doing because I'm telling you, his heart truly is love logical and he's doing it because he cares. You know, he's doing it because he truly cares. And if anybody has any questions for him, his email is, you want to give them your email, Brandon?
Yes, yes. So you can actually reach me at Joshua Daniel at givingjoshuaachance.org. You could also reach me at bhigg3 at icloud.com. Either of these emails work. Feel free to shoot me any questions, and I will answer the best I can.
Okay, and I'll repeat that. It's givingjoshuaachance.org. Givingjoshuaachance.org, and there's a contact there as well. So thank you so much. Brandon, I'm going to give you a call about 10 minutes from now. And everyone, thank you for listening in, and have a wonderful night. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.